As a leading expert in the wholesaling industry, I've made it a priority to educate and inform wholesalers and aspiring wholesalers about regulation, legislation, and best practices so that you can operate legally and ethically. Now, it seems like every time I turn around, there is another law passed cracking down on wholesaling real estate, and this time an ordinance was recently passed prohibiting commercial harassment from wholesalers. What does that mean? It's not good. Find out all the details coming up.
This video is brought to you by 10K Club, a program that pays you $10,000 for finding ugly houses. Learn more at my10kcheck.com.
If you're new here, my name is Jerry Norton. I've been a full-time real estate investor now for almost 18 years. Amongst other things, I specialize in flipping houses all across the country, and I've helped thousands of new investors get into the game of flipping and create six-figure and even seven-figure incomes. If you want to learn how to flip houses so you can live your dream life, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon to get notified when new videos are released. I've been saying this and I'll say it again, regulation is coming and it's coming fast to the wholesaling industry. Another city has imposed new regulations on wholesalers and it's not good. This time, it's the city of Atlanta, Georgia. Apparently, due to increasing complaints that wholesalers harass homeowners with incessant phone calls, letters, and inquiries to sell their properties, the Atlanta City Council passed an ordinance earlier this year prohibiting what they call commercial harassment from property wholesalers. Now, I've got a copy of this ordinance which specifies what commercial harassment means and what constitutes violating this law, which I'll explain in a minute. But even if you're not a wholesaler in Atlanta, you better pay close attention to this video because the wholesaling industry is under attack, and if wholesalers don't up their game and operate at a higher level, the industry will continue to get regulated and possibly even banned altogether. I mean, this new law in Atlanta is really scary and honestly quite shocking. I also strongly believe it's time we as an industry organize to create best practices and have a voice. More on that and what I'm doing to lead the charge at the end of this video. Now, this ordinance first stemmed from a report that came out last year by WABE, W-A-B-E, which is a radio station in Atlanta, Georgia that is affiliated with National Public Radio, NPR. Now, council members in Atlanta took this report at its face value and used it as the basis for enacting this new ordinance, and much of this report's claims made it into the ordinance. I read the entire report and it's extremely biased and derogatory towards wholesalers, referring to them as predatory and accusing wholesalers of coercing homeowners in gentrifying neighborhoods to sell for way below the fair market value. Now, right in the ordinance, it called these actions of wholesalers equity theft and states, Atlanta residents often feel pressured to engage in commercial activities, including selling their homes due to commercial harassment. Commercial harassment? I've never heard of such a thing. What the heck is commercial harassment? Well, it explains what commercial harassment is. It says, whereas persons and entities who engage in commercial harassment persuade, convince, cajole, pressure, force, harass, or otherwise coerce residents to engage in commercial activities, including to coerce homeowners into selling their property. And just so we're clear, the definition of coercion is to persuade an unwilling person to do something by using force or threats. Now, I'm going to come back to that. It goes on to say more than 1 in 4 homes sold for a price that was less than half the estimated fair market value. Now, wow, that sounds really bad. And since the wholesaling industry isn't organized and doesn't have a unified voice, these baseless accusations went unquestioned and unchallenged, and legislation was easily passed. But I've seen this narrative before, and it's the same story all over again. The same arguments were made in Philadelphia, which also called wholesalers predatory and subsequently led to regulation, which I did a video all about. It's the same story recently published by Bloomberg News that took the same unfounded position against wholesalers, which I also did a video all about. By the way, I'll put the links to both those videos in the description box below, and you can check them out later. But this idea that wholesalers somehow steal from unsuspecting homeowners and consumers need to be protected from these predatory investors is the perfect narrative to get consumer protection advocates really excited. But where's the other side? Where are the advocates for wholesalers? Where are the happy homeowners who are more than thrilled to have sold their unwanted properties? Who is standing up against these unfounded claims? Well, I am, damn it. Here goes. A seller has many options to sell, and there are often several buyers to choose from, and the seller has the opportunity to choose the best offer, and if the price is too low, he can choose not to sell his property. What an insult to humanity to think a seller is so incapable of making decisions for himself. If the seller is smart enough to buy a property, he's smart enough to sell a property, and if he thinks he can get more for his house, he will. It's asinine to think that a wholesaler forces or coerces a homeowner to sell against his will. I want to see one legit case where a wholesaler forced a seller against their will to sell. It's just absurd. No one is putting a gun to the seller's head and saying, sell me your property at 50% of its current value or else. The truth is, there is a reason why he is selling to a wholesaler, and that is what all of this one-sided biased narrative fails to recognize. In most cases, these are dilapidated and distressed properties that are unfit for retail and often uninhabitable. Is equity theft really happening? What's really interesting is the ordinance that cited that wholesalers were stealing equity from these sellers failed to mention that the data used to determine fair market value was from Zillow's estimate of value called Zestimate. So they took the sale price of the home and they compared it to the property's Zestimate. Well, there is a major flaw in that approach. The Zestimate doesn't account for the condition of the property. For example, if Zillow says the fair market value of a home is $100,000, but that house needs a roof, window, siding, flooring, kitchen, bath, mechanicals, and everything else, totaling, let's say, $50,000 in repairs, then the actual fair market value of the house isn't $100,000, it's only $50,000, even though Zillow says it's $100,000. And the majority of properties that sell to wholesalers are in need of extensive repairs. Let me prove my point. This is the report used to create this ordinance accusing wholesalers of equity theft. Right in the report is a picture of one of these houses where a wholesaler supposedly stole a seller's equity. Look at that house. It's in terrible condition. Here's another picture of a house in the report. Now this picture is hilarious. It has an unscrupulous wholesaler caught in the act, taking a selfie with a big smile on his face, no doubt right after he forced at gunpoint an old lady in a wheelchair to sell her house, stealing all of her hard-earned equity. Come on, give me a break and look at that house. Of course it sold for 50% of Zillow. It's practically falling down. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that if those properties that sold to wholesalers at 50% of Zillow were listed with real estate agents and sold on market instead, they probably would have sold for around the same price and the seller would have had to pay commissions. Now, to me, it is ridiculous these claims made against wholesalers. Sure, there are isolated incidents where wholesalers take advantage of someone, just like real estate agents and every other industry. But by and large, the reality is in most cases, these houses are vacant, in major disrepair, they're huge eyesores for the neighborhood, attracting gangs and drugs, and the sellers don't want to list with agents and knowingly, willingly sell these unwanted properties to wholesalers. And the end result is investors fix up these homes, providing affordable housing, paying property taxes, and beautifying neighborhoods, which benefits everyone. What's really going on is wholesalers serve a much needed segment of the market and are a blessing and a benefit to the economy. That's what's really going on. So what happened in Atlanta? After this report came out, one thing led to another, and boom, Atlanta passed an ordinance prohibiting wholesalers from using what they call predatory practices, which on the second paragraph of the ordinance is defined as repeated and unsolicited attempts within any 180-day period to contact a person or entity, including via personal visits or written material or similar means under circumstances where the person or entity has affirmatively requested the defendant or the defendant's agent to refrain from such activity. Translation, if you contact the seller by any means, door knocking, phone, text, or direct mail, and the seller says he is not interested, you cannot contact him again for 6 months or you're breaking the law, which could result in fines of $1,000 or 6 months in jail under state law. Wow. So Atlanta wholesalers, you better make sure a seller doesn't accidentally end up on a different list and you send a postcard to him twice in a 6-month window or you might go to jail. This is so ridiculous. First of all, I know a lot of wholesalers, and I've never known a wholesaler to repeatedly harass a homeowner who said no, they don't want to sell. That would be a complete waste of time and marketing dollars. And two, I have to point out the hypocrisy in this law. Now, I buy a lot of properties, and do you know the ungodly amount of solicitations I get from real estate agents? I get mail, I get phone calls, I get text messages from agents soliciting their services. Why aren't they considered predatory? And since when is advertising and marketing fall under the classification of coercion? I have an idea. If the same person contacts you twice within 6 months and you find that offensive, block their call, throw their mail in the recycling, or do what any respectable person does and point a shotgun at them on your porch. Trust me, that dirty, rotten wholesaler won't bother you anymore. But do we really need laws about how often to market your services? What has the world come to when we throw someone in jail because they sent 2 postcards to a seller? This law just infuriates me because to me, wholesalers are getting steamrolled by the National Association of Realtors, consumer protection agencies, and regulatory boards, and it's not the regulation per se that has me so upset. It's the false accusations and blatant lack of representation. I don't see any attempt to reach across the aisle and get wholesalers involved in the conversation and have a fair and balanced discussion, and I'm fed up with it. We are going to organize. I've already retained my lawyer to create the beginnings of a formal association, including bylaws. Now, this would give us a legal organization and a solid foundation to begin building a board of directors. My goal is to create standardized training with certification, best practices, a code of ethics, and with time, become a force to be reckoned with. We have to become a voice that can't be ignored. It's time to make a stand. If you agree and would be willing to join a wholesaler association so we fight for our cause, leave a comment and say, Jerry, thank you for leading the charge. For wholesalers, you are a flipping genius. Finally, it's time wholesalers raise the bar and operate at a higher level. We can't give these anti-wholesaler groups any more cause to come after us. I want you to watch a video where I explain the 5 most common ways wholesalers operate dishonestly and unethically. You might be surprised. Watch that video now, and if you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. With almost 800 videos, this is the #1 channel on YouTube for all things flipping, and I'll see you on the next video.